Jesus' last hours, Luke 23. I'm going to start at verse 32. I'm going to go through verse 43. Luke 23. Good, all filled in here with a good crowd. Appreciate you coming. Sure do love y'all. What a great bunch of people we have at Open Door, faithful. We got a lot of people watching right now, and some are people with health issues and other things, and we appreciate all of you being here and watching. Luke 23, and it says this in verse 32. It says, there were also two others, malefactors, led with him to be put to death. And when they were come to the place which is called Calvary, they were crucified with him, and the malefactors, one on the left hand, one on the right hand, and the other on the left. Then said Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots. And the people stood beholding, and the rulers also with them derided him, saying, He saved others, let him save himself, if he be the Christ, the chosen of God. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming unto him and offering him vinegar, and saying, If thou be the King of the Jews, save thyself. And a superscription also was written over him in letters in Greek and Latin and Hebrew, This is the King of the Jews. And one of the malefactors which were hanged, railed on him, saying, If thou be Christ, save thyself and us. And the other answered, rebuked him, saying, Dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we received the due reward of our deeds. But this man had done nothing amiss. And he said unto Jesus, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said unto him, Verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the truth of the Scripture. Thank you, Lord, for this beautiful passage, Lord. And Lord, there is a lot that happens on the cross, a lot in the last few hours of Jesus' life. And I pray today, Lord, to be able to do that justice and understand it. And I pray you'd speak in a powerful way. I pray each heart would be receptive to your word. I pray that someone who doesn't know you as Savior would receive you. I pray that we'd all become more like Jesus. I just pray for the Holy Spirit to move in a powerful way and for your word to become alive and glowing and powerful and clear, and that it would not return void, but pierce even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit, and work in a powerful way. I need your help, and I ask for that help and the Spirit's power in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. Tobias was a boy and born in a bad home, a poor house in Capernaum, and just a one-room house with a dad who was uneducated and poor and didn't have a good job and went and tried to find work all the time and worked hard and long hours, as many times people who don't have skills in those days would have to do to make a living, and they were tired, worn out. The mom was frustrated with the children, with the small house, with the poverty. Her husband, oftentimes happens, became a drinker and spent some of the little bit of money they had, and there was no future. And one of the boys, Tobias, was not a good boy. Look, you just see children. Children are partly a product of their environment. Some kids are just rougher than others. Now they can be changed and transformed. Some kids are just so sweet by nature. They're just always good, and that's the way children are. But Tobias was one of those kids who was just from the start a troublesome child, and then his home didn't help any, and he became worse and worse. He wasn't educated, and when he was, of course, just a little child, there was an unhappy, argumentative home, and as he continued to grow, he was a disobedient child, so he's beaten, and the parents weren't good at doing that in a kind way, and he also was a child who liked to steal things. And he would steal the little bit of food they had and eat it when mom and dad weren't looking. And he did those things. And he was sent out of the house a lot because mom was tired of the kids and the noise. And there were just a few kids, but they were noisy. And Tobias would be out of the house, and he would go out and he would be hungry. And he would wander around and steal things at the market and try to take people's food and grab things. And he just caused a lot of problems. And that was him. And he continued to do that as just kind of a street kid for years and years, and did all those things. And he was trouble. He, at about 10 years old, he was at home, and he realized, he saw one day Dad doing something kind of sneaky, and he realized Dad kind of was hiding something. And later when Mom and Dad were looking, he looked, and in a little panel, Dad was hiding some money that he had saved up, and he saw that was there, and so he reached in and grabbed some of that and stole that. And the next day, the dad went to put some other money in there, and he saw that some was missing, and Mom and Dad started fighting and arguing, and he accused her, and she accused him, and they argued and fought, and Tobias stayed there quietly, but he had gone out and spent the money on just garbage and treats and things like that, and he didn't say a word. And he went and waited a little while longer because he's very good at stealing. He's a natural thief. And he waited a little while, and come a couple weeks later, he went and stole some more and went out and spent it. And Mom and Dad decided they weren't sure that it was the other ones, so they kind of waited. And then Dad went and put a whole bunch of money in there, and then they kept a close eye, and seemed like Tobias was kind of eyeing them, and they got suspicious of him. And one night after Dad put a bunch of money in there, they pretended like they were asleep. How many ever pretended like you're asleep to watch somebody? Okay, and they pretended like they're asleep, and all of a sudden Tobias got up and opened the panel, and Dad got up and grabbed him and started beating him and threw him out of the house. And Tobias, at 10 years old, slept outside that night. The next morning he tried to come in, and Dad said, "You can't come back in our house. You've been stealing things your whole life. We can't afford to feed you. Go take care of yourself." And never allowed him in the house again. And so he was an orphan street kid in Capernaum there. And Tobias began living in the streets, and he was a natural thief. He went and stole more and more. He learned to steal at the market. He learned to go and pick pockets. He learned to steal from different people, different places. But people started seeing him and knowing him. And at the market, they'd see him come in, and they'd whack him, and they'd beat him, and they'd throw things at him. And all of them got warned of him eventually. And after a few years of him trying different areas and going different things, pretty much everybody in town knew him. The authorities knew him, and he was despised because he stole so many things. And so years later, he was a young teenager, and he went out on the road to Damascus. And that road to Damascus had a lot of people traveling back and forth, and he would look for a lone traveler at night, and he would try to sneak into the camp and take their bags or take something from them. And eventually he fell into some thieves. And there were 6 or 7 thieves like him. They were a band, they were a gang, and they had weapons, and he fell in at them. And they began robbing people in violent ways and taking people, merchants, people coming down this road. And for years he lived with them, and they made more and more, and they captured people. They were careful about watching for the wrong people, but the crime started getting so bad. And that eventually the Romans came, and they laid a trap, and what looked like a merchant's wagon was full of centurions and soldiers, and they captured that gang. And Tobias is one of the ones they captured. They took him back, and after beating them, they weren't nice then, they put him in jail, and they locked him up, and he stayed in jail for months and months and months. And eventually they let him out of the jail there. And he went back into town. He was older now, didn't look quite the same. He went to his parents' home. They wouldn't let him back in. He went around town and stole for a while. And he said, this is a hard way to live, living in the forest and things like that. And there's a lot of rich people, and I'm sharing the money with all those thieves. I know how to do this better, and I know better ways. And he started looking, instead of just trying to steal an apple here and there, he decided he'd look for people who had money. And he started looking, man, that person's dressed nice. They must have money. And he started noticing that they many times have a bag hanging or reach into their pocket somehow. And he started noticing the type of people. And he really became good at that. He stayed away from the markets because that wasn't where the good stuff was, and he began picking pockets. He began going into the shops and looking at one thing while he's stealing another because he's very, very good at doing those things, and he became better and better at that. Eventually, he was known. Eventually, the centurion saw him and said, "I had arrested you before, and I've seen the way you're looking at things and looking at people." And he came after him with a sword, and Tobias took off, and he went to a different place. He ended up coming down south and going farther down towards Jerusalem. Ended up in Damascus, and in Damascus, he started stealing people with money. He started getting more and more. He started breaking into houses. He would watch when people who had nice houses would leave. He would see when the servants went out the back door, and he would sneak into that house, and he would break in. He would steal things, and he would get things. And then he started going. He realized he could snatch purses. And he watched for rich people, and he could grab a purse. And he actually got his own place, started living in his own place because he had enough money now, and he was making more money with his stealing things. And one day a lady was going into a shop, and she had come up in a very nice wagon, a chariot, and she was going to this nice, expensive shop, this jewelry shop, and they had parked around the corner, and her driver was around the corner, and he saw her walking in, and she was very rich. She was a Jewish lady, he noticed, and he realized those Jewish people, they in the area had a lot of money, and so he thought, man, this lady, and he noticed the weight of her bag as she walked into this nice shop. Well, he walked in behind her, and he was looking at things, and she bought some expensive things. And noticed when she opened her bag, he looked inside, and this thing was full of gold, coins. But he went back out, didn't buy anything. He went back outside, and he hid around the corner, and he noticed there was a gap between when the driver would be able to see and when she got out of the shop and walked out of the shop, and he waited around the corner. And as soon as she walked out, he grabbed the purse and yanked it. But this woman is stronger than he thought. And she wouldn't let go of it. Never mess with a woman's purse, amen? And by the way, one of the most miraculous things on the planet is a woman's purse. My wife will say to me, "It's in my purse." She might as well say it's in the Pacific Ocean. I mean, I look in that thing, I look, I don't know where, I don't understand that thing. It's not that big, but stuff just hides in there. And, just tell me it's in the Rocky Mountains or something. I can't find it. Here, you find it. But she wouldn't let go of the purse, and she was stronger than she looked. And he yanked on it, and she held onto it, and she started hitting him and screaming. And he yanked again, and she wouldn't let go, and people started looking and coming. And he went and he punched her in the face, and her head hit the wall and cracked, and she collapsed, and he started running with the bag, and all of a sudden somebody grabbed him and somebody tackled him, and people piled on him, and they started beating him. And they called for the soldiers. Soldiers began coming, and and one of the soldiers grabbed him and said, "I know him." And it was the same centurion. And they started dragging him away and off to jail and off of there. But boy, he was fast, and he knew this city like the back of his hand. And as soon as somebody let go of him for a sec, he yanked away from the other arm and ran into an alley and jumped up this and ran down that and squeezed through this. And he knew how to get away, and he escaped. He never knew what happened to the lady. He never got the purse. He realized, I've got to move to a different city. He moved to another city, but then he realized something. He realized that he found a new place to steal and a new way to steal. The best place he found was people were traveling when they'd come through Damascus. They were coming for the holy days in Jerusalem, and all the Jewish people had to come there. Now, he'd grown up around the Jewish people and heard them, and they were all around the region, and and he knew they all had to come for the holy days. And when they came through for the holy days, they were traveling, and travelers have money on them. And then he got into town, and in Jerusalem, the city was packed. Hundreds of thousands of people from around the world would come into the city. And when people are packed in, they bump into each other. People bump into you, don't feel a whole bunch, and it's really easy to pick a pocket. It's really easy to take money from somebody. And he continued, and he would go to those holy days, and he'd go to Jerusalem, and he would act like a worshiper, and he would come. Sometimes he even brought a lamb with him to act like he was one of the people who were worshiping, and he had his lamb sacrificed and said, man, it can't hurt me. I have a lot of sins. And he went to Jerusalem, and he would steal things, and he took away the money there. Pickpocketing. He'd wait till the Pharisees, who were very rich, would leave their houses to go to the temple or to go worship or go to synagogue, and he would go and rob their houses, and he was making a killing there in Jerusalem, and he kept on doing that. One day along came another Passover, and it was getting towards Passover, and everybody's coming to town, and as they came, he was watching. This year was a little different. It was a little noisier. There was some different feeling in the air and a little more violent. And he noticed the guards were oftentimes, they were having to stop. People were it was tense, and there was a feeling of tension in the air this year, and a lot of it was going on. And he noticed that there was a captain of the guard, and he went by the house one time. And he looked in, and he saw the captain of the guard drinking out of a big two-handed type mug, and the thing was gold and encrusted with jewels. Right then, Tobias said, "I got to have that thing." So he started watching that house and getting how that guard was. And then during that Passover, on his schedule, he saw the guard leaving because he heard some noise and a tumult over there somewhere. And the guard took out, and he noticed that the servants were out back. He went to the back window. He climbed in the window. He started digging through the cabinets, and he looked, and he found that big old encrusted, jeweled thing. He was so excited, and he turned around to leave, and he felt himself hitting the ground and someone landing on top of him. And the servants had come back in and grabbed him and tackled him and held him down, and soon the captain came back. And the captain said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "This guy was stealing your stuff." And he said, "You thief, you're in my house." And he says, "Come with me." And they took him down, and they took him before one of the judges there. And the captain said, "This man has stolen this thing. And this man stolen, and he was in my cabin." And when he started saying that, another lady, a Jewish lady who was in there, said, "That's him. That's the one who hit me in the head. This scar on my head. That's the one who tried to steal my purse and got away." And then a centurion over here, who was one of the guards, said, that was in Damascus, wasn't it?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "That is the same guy I arrested at Capernaum." He says, "Judge, this man is evil. He's violent. This man, he doesn't just deserve to be put in jail. He needs crucified." The captain said, "Crucify him." And the judge says, "Crucify him." And Tobias said, "No, I just sold some things. I'm not that bad." He said, "You're going to be crucified. Take him away." And off he's led away to his cell. He put in the cell with a couple other guys. Another guy was just like him, another guy like him. Another guy was a murderer who, enduring an insurrection, had caused a riot and murdered people. And they're put in the cell. And then they heard a big crowd and a bunch of screaming, and they heard crowds chanting things and a bunch of noises going on. And the guards came in and grabbed them out and took them. And they went up to the castle, and there was Pontius Pilate and being tried in front of him was a man everybody had heard of named Jesus. And this man named Jesus was standing there peacefully. And they were asking, "Have you done these things? Are you this? Are you against Caesar?" And he wasn't talking. Now, Tobias had seen him before. At one of the crowds, it was a great place to pick pockets. Everybody's watching healing. And he'd been stealing there. And he stopped and he watched it. Man, that guy was blind. He can see now. That guy can walk. That was that crazy person who was screaming, and he's healed. And it was all over the region. He traveled a lot, and he saw this Jesus of Nazareth. He saw him several times, but now he's being tried in front of Pilate. And Pilate does not want to condemn him. And these three were brought. And finally, Pilate says, hey, it's your custom, you Jewish guys. You're supposed to release one prisoner. Look, we've got Barabbas over here. He's a murderer. He was a guy standing next to Tobias. He says, how about we let Jesus go so we get Barabbas crucified? He hasn't killed anybody. He hasn't done anything bad. Crucify him. Release to us Barabbas. You want a murderer let free? What's he done? I wash my hands from this thing. Barabbas is released, and Tobias looks at him and says, I should be released before him. Why is he being released, and this guy who hasn't done anything, who's innocent, being taken to be crucified? The sentence is given, crucify him. They grab Tobias, they grab Jesus, they grab the other thief, and they begin marching them down. But they don't just take Jesus like the other ones. They take him because crucifixion is death, and they would just take somebody, nail him to a tree, and hang him on there, and that's what they did. But this Jesus over here, they took him differently. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They put purple on him because kings wore purple. They wanted to mock him. They beat the crown of thorns into his head. They ripped his beard out. The centurions started punching him and mocking him and saying, prophesy, who did this? Now, in the crowd, of course, the people getting crucified were hated, and Tobias got some punches and some kicks and some spit on, but he was taken and wrapped around a pole, and then they took a cat of nine tails and began just ripping his body to shreds. Yet he wasn't angry. Tobias would try to hit somebody and spit back at them. This man just took it quietly. The other thief was violent and angry, fighting and trying to kick his way free. And anybody tried to hit him, he'd hit them back, and he'd spit at people and yell insults. But Jesus wouldn't do that. They marched them and they said, we're taking him to Golgotha. He's not a normal prisoner. Let's put him on the hill of the skull overlooking everything. And let's go ahead and put him up on top up there. And let's crucify him on top of the hill with the skull on it. So everybody can see what happens when somebody thinks that they're the king. But Jesus couldn't carry his cross. They had to stop Simon, a man, and said, hey, carry his cross, he's too weak. And Jesus, you could see his ribs. He was beaten worse than everybody else. He was tortured worse than anybody else. And he was stumbled and fell and was dragged and all the way down the Via Dolorosa, all the way up, and they went up to Golgotha. And Tobias was laid upon that cross, and they laid him down, and then they put the nails in the hands and feet of him, and then Jesus in the middle, then the other thief, and then they would crucify you on the ground, and then they'd put the cross up into the ground, into the hole that's already dug there, so he just slammed down in there, and he felt his joints just rip, and he felt the pain in his hands and feet, and Tobias said, I can't believe this, I'm going to die. What's going to happen to me? I've been in Jerusalem all these holy days. I've heard all these things about God. I've heard about Messiah. I've heard about the sacrifice. I've heard all these things. I've sat outside the synagogues and listened. I've listened to the Jews come on 7 different holy days a year, and I've listened. I know all these things, and I've heard all these things, and I've heard about God, and I've heard about Messiah, and I've heard about heaven. I've heard about hell, but I am guilty. I thought I had time. And there he was. But he was ignored. See, the Jewish leaders came down and they mocked him. Yeah, you're really a king there. If you're the king, make yourself come down. We'll follow you now. Make yourself come. You don't look like a king now. The soldiers mocking him, and they bowed down to him, and they made fun of him, and everyone was mocking him and saying, you say to the king of Jews, look at you. And Tobias got wrapped up and said, that is pretty pathetic. You said you were a king, and you are hanging on a tree. You're all ripped to shreds. You're treated worse than any of us. You're worse off than if you just said you weren't anything. You are worse than all of us. And everyone is mocking him. The other thief was mocking him. Everyone is mocking him. And then they had taken his robe and they were gambling over it. And something just kind of rang in Tobias' mind. I remember something about that. When I was listening on those holy days, they were talking about Messiah comes, that they would cast lots for something about his clothing. And suddenly Jesus says something, the last thing you'd expect to hear. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgive them? They know what they're doing. They're crucifying you. Forgive them. They're mocking you. They're laughing at you. They're making fun of your. They went the extra mile with you. I don't got a crown of thorns. Why would you want them forgiven? They did this on purpose. They asked for a murderer. Forgive them. Why would you want them to do that? They offered him vinegar, and he said, vinegar? That was something they talked about Messiah also. It's kind of weird. Something feels strange, and something's not quite normal here. We were just mocking him. You know what? I think it said something about Messiah would be numbered with the malefactors, with the criminals. And cursed is he that hangs upon a tree. His hands would be pierced, and his feet. The Lamb of God. Isn't that what John the Baptist said that this guy was? And the Lamb was slaughtered for the sins? I was just mocking him. And the other thief, he begins to mock and say, you know what? You're worse than all of us. Take yourself down. Hey, when you take yourself down, take us with you. And Tobias looks over and says, hey, hush. He hasn't done anything wrong. He could take himself down. I can tell. We're here because we deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. Jesus, when you enter into your kingdom, will you remember me? He's never going to do this. This is awful. I was just mocking him. And now I'm asking him to take me to heaven. Me, who never stopped. Me, who in all of his sins and the wounding and the people he hurt and the people he injured and the thing and all the guilt he just felt is incredible. All the guilt, he realized how guilty he was. And to his shock, he hears this. Today, before the end of the day, you'll be with me in paradise. Me? But he felt it. All the sins being lifted, all the sins being released. He felt the love, and in his eyes he saw the one whose ribs were sticking out, looking at him in love and saying, I want you with me. Somehow he knew Jesus knew all about him, all about his sin. He knew when he's a little child the first time he stole. He knew when he went in that last time when he stole that thing from the captain. He knew everything he ever done, and yet he loved him. And he knew somehow that this, what was happening right now, was for his sins, was for him. He laid his head back and said, it's gone. My sins are gone. I'm going to go to heaven someday. He's in agony. He's laying there. He's hanging on the cross in the pain, trying to get the next breath. And he hears the strangest thing in the world. The sky turns black. Everything's pitch black. It's the middle of the day. It's noon. And the sky's black. And it just goes dark. Everyone's still mocking. Jesus, of all the strange thing, he says, looks down to a woman who's weeping there and says, behold, your son. And he said to a disciple standing next to her, "Behold your mother." And he says, he's dying. And he just made sure somebody's going to take care of his mom. It stays dark for hours. The whole world is looking and saying, what is going on here? Why is it so dark? And then Jesus says the strangest thing, with his skin hanging down, with his crown of thorns, the nails through his hands and feet, all the blood, everything wrong with his body. He says the strangest thing. He says, I thirst. That's the least of the worries. Why is he saying he's thirsty? But as Tobias thought, he felt when that darkness came, like the whole world was different and like God just forgot the world. And Jesus, he looked at him and he saw the agony of him. And he wasn't licking his lips. He was looking up to heaven. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? Tobias knows something's going on between the Son of God and the Father. And he's in agony and pain. Tobias is almost unconscious. His head's hanging. He hears some words. It is finished. He can't even open his eyes. And he says, that's for me, it's finished. It's done. Into thy hands I commit my spirit. And he gave up the ghost. And an earthquake happens and somebody screams, the temple veil has been ripped in half. And Tobias suddenly feels good and he looks up. And he's in a beautiful area. And he feels incredible and he's not hanging anymore. And he's alive. And there is Jesus smiling at him. With nails in his hands and his feet, arms out to embrace him. And says, Tobias, welcome into paradise. You barely made it, man. You pushed it. He looks around and he sees the saints. And he's alive. And he realizes he's got a perfect body. And he has no desire to do wrong anymore. And he understands you. You. I saw you, but I didn't know you. Thank you so much. I mocked you 10 minutes before I died. I mean, you were, I love you. Thank you. The thief didn't get time to get baptized. Didn't do any good works. He was mocking the Son of God right before he died. He didn't prove himself. He didn't join the church. He didn't live a good life. He was being crucified for being a wicked, awful thief. And yet he is in heaven watching us right now. Because for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It's a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. This man got saved the last seconds of his life, and he got saved even though he's a wicked, wicked man, even though he mocked Jesus on the cross. And it says that he was one of the ones mocking him. Look at Mark chapter 15. Mark chapter 15. He was mocking with the other thief. Verse 32. As everybody's mocking in verse 31, likewise also the chief priests mocking said among themselves, this is verse 32, with the scribes, he saved others, himself he cannot save. Let Christ the King of Israel descend from the cross, that we may see and believe. And they that were crucified with him reviled him. They. By the way, it says it again in another one of the Gospels too. Jesus' last hours of his life were very eventful. You would think All right, he'd been beaten and whipped and everything else. He put him on the cross. He's dead. No. Massive events happened during that time. And I want to talk about Jesus' last hours. It's going to be very short points. What did Jesus do in his last hours? Number one, he suffered incredibly. We know he suffered physically. Crucifixion is, you can't breathe. You're getting nails to your hands and feet. In his case, the crown of thorns, ripping his beard out. In his case, the whipping until his bones looked on him. It said his visage was so marred, his face was so swollen, you couldn't tell he was a man. It said we looked upon his bones because the skin was torn back from the cat o' nine tails. His skin would have been hanging. He was beaten and punched and hit. Of course he suffered physically. But he also suffered mentally. It said his humiliation was upon him in Acts chapter 8, verse 30. Of course, he's stripped naked in front of everybody to be crucified. He's mocked. He is a King of kings and Lord of lords who's going to wear the crown of eternity. And we'll cast our crowns before his feet. Yet they put on him a crown of thorns. They mocked him as a king and bowed down to him. And yet he really is the King of kings and Lord of lords. They went and punched him and said, prophesy, who just hit you? Yet he could have prophesied and told who hit them. He could have said, you are this, you were born this day in this house, and you did this sin in this day, and this is what you did, and you have a birthmark. He could have told him everything about them. Yet he didn't. He went like a sheep to the slaughter, like a lamb. He was humiliated and laughed at and mocked. And those Pharisees who hated him and mocked him and said, yeah, you're the King of Jews. Right. Before Abraham was, you are. Look at that. Now you're being crucified and mocked and humiliated. And how much the pride of mankind would like to say, oh yeah? Boom! In 1,000 different ways. Turn them into rats or whatever he wanted to do. Just call fire down from heaven. Take his throne like he's coming in Revelation 19 and look like that. Call his big white horse down and get on top of it as King of Kings and have his vesture dipped in blood and the white robe and everything. But no, he took it. The Romans are mocking him. The Pharisees are mocking him. His family, his mom and Mary Magdalene were down there weeping. And imagine the pain of a mother seeing their son hanging there crucified. And to see your mom down there and she already doesn't have her husband anymore. And now he's the one who takes care of her. And she's weeping and broken and has to watch the whole thing. Your disciples had abandoned you. You had 5 and 10 and 15,000 people when you're doing miracles, and when it's time to defend you, there's no witnesses saying, no, he's a son of God. Your top disciple denies you with a curse. He had emotional pain. He was suffering. But the worst was spiritual pain. You see, Jesus wasn't worried about water. The world turned black and turned dark when he's on the cross because the Bible says Jesus bore our iniquities. Every sin in the history of mankind, from that first bite of fruit until the last person in the millennium, sins. Every murder, every rape, every adultery, every child molestation, every curse word, every lie, every war, every single sin in the history of mankind, every single human who's ever lived, every 5-year-old, every 90-year-old, every single human in every single country, in every single tribe, all those sins were collected and put on him on that cross. Every sin in the history of humanity was sitting on him. And the Bible says the Lord is too holy as to behold iniquity. And God the Father, who is part of the Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, were all of a sudden separated. And God the Father said, I reject you. You're evil. I'm separating from you. That sin is evil. And Jesus, for the first time in all eternity, did not have the light of God upon him. He was cursed. He was lost. He became sin for us. He was a big body, black of sin to God. And God said, I can't even look at you. You are suffering hell and separation from me right now. And Jesus says, I've never felt godless. My Father's always Son said, this is my Son in whom I am well pleased. There's no God. I'm separated from God. I'm thirsty. I need God. I thirst. Because he's spiritually suffering the rejection of the Father. That you and I would suffer in hell. And he's suffering that separation from God. And he could do it in a day, but that separation is so deep and powerful with God of sin that it's everybody's eternal hell and pain was put on him in a moment. And God says, separated. And he suffered in those hours. Forsaken by God, he suffered for you and I, physically, emotionally, and spiritually in those hours. Number 2, what did he do in those hours? He forgave. The Jews lied about him. They brought false witnesses. Not all the Jews, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They were gambling over his clothes. They were mocking him. The thieves were mocking him. The crowd was mocking him. And we would have said, are you mocking me, thief? You are guilty. I'm the Son of God. And you Roman soldiers, you were given this authority by me. This is written down before the foundation of the world. Don't get so haughty. And you guys down there, the crowd mocking me, and you Pharisees and you Sadducees who hate me and have laughed and mocked at me. You know what? When I come back from the dead, you're going to see. You know what? I'm going to pray God will kill you right now. You deserve it. You're the one who caused this. No. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. It makes your offenses and the people you won't forgive seem awfully petty. When I was studying this, I'm like, my suffering's not that big a deal. My forgiveness is not that hard. My forgiveness is Jesus, but wait a minute. He did this while he was dying, bearing the sins of the world in physical agony, in all this pain. Do you ever, see, we don't have people who do this often anymore. Most people, and this is most people now. It used to be a lot of people, now it's most people. When they're suffering, have nothing for anybody else. Don't you know I'm having a hard time? I just need you to just do this stuff for me. You know what? Don't you know I have problems too. Father, forgive them. He had problems. And by the way, when you feel like that, you know when you feel awful, how hard it is to care about anybody else? Jesus was still caring about people. Next, he took care of his family. John chapter 19. John chapter 19. Let's go quickly. 26 and 27. He took care of his family while being crucified. Verse 26, when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved, he said to his mother, Woman, behold thy son. And he said to that disciple, Behold thy mother. From that hour the disciple took her into his own home. He is dying. His ribs are hanging out. He's got the crown of thorns. He's trying to get his breath. Because when you're crucified, you're hanging by your arms and you can't expand your lungs. They usually suffocate to death. That's why they have to push up for every breath because your arms are hanging out and you can't retract your ribs and your lungs. And he looks down, he says his mom down there, and he realizes, my mom is not going to be taken care of. I've been taking care of her. Woman, behold thy son. Hey, John, she's your mother now. While he's carrying the sins of the world, while he's humiliated, why he's sitting there naked, why he's in agony from head to toe with nails through his feet and hands and crown of thorns and the rough cross rubbing against his back and all these things going on, he's caring for his family on the cross. Next, he finished the work of God. John chapter 19 and verse 30, while we're nearby there. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished. Thank God for that. The last sin was suffered for. It is finished. Jesus finished the job that God gave him. John chapter 17 and verse 4. And I have glorified thee on earth. I have finished the work which thou gavest me to do. We are not in a generation of finishers. We're in a generation of people who start things. Lots of people will start going to church. Lots of people will start serving God. Lots of people will start a job. You ever go after somebody who's supposed to finish a job? You notice they just don't clean up at the end or don't put their tools away or whatever because we don't have finishers. Yet Jesus got a pile of things to do on earth, and he said, it's finished. I did it all. You understand, when Jesus died, he was not killed. He gave up the ghost. It's very important. He said that he would do that, and he gave up the ghost. Let me take it back to, let's look Luke 23 again, where we were. It says it there, Luke 23. He gave up the ghost. That matters. He chose to die for you. The whole thing was willing. No man took his life from him. Luke 23 and verse 46. Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. And having done this, he gave up the ghost. It says in John, even more clear, in chapter 10 and verse 18, in John chapter 10 and verse 18, he says this. He says, no man taketh it from me. Let me go to verse 17. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I laid down my life, that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down myself. I have power to lay it down. I have power to take it again. This commandment I received of my Father. My Father told me to die for the sins of the world. I will die. I will choose to die. I will give my life because I love people. He finished the work. He did everything God gave him to do. And he stayed faithful unto death. And he did that for us while he's on the cross. All these things. He suffered incredibly. He forgave. He took care of his family. He finished the work. He loved. Can you imagine even thinking of anybody else? My back, my hands, my feet. Why are these people mocking me? I'm already dying. No. This thief over here, he's going to get saved. These people need forgiven. My mom needs taken care of. He loved. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Look at John 13. Beautiful verse. John 13. He loved while he was on the cross. Look what John says of him. John 13, verse 1, now therefore the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. But they're going to betray him. They're going to deny him. No, he loved them to the end. He looked at Peter, who denied him and cursed. Right after Peter cursed, and all of a sudden Jesus, beaten and starting the crucifixion process, looks over at Peter and sees him. And he loved him still. After the resurrection, he said, call the disciples and Peter. I want Peter to know I still love him. Thief on the cross, you mocked me 20 minutes ago. You'll be with me in paradise. I just died for every sin you ever did. I just suffered for it because he loved. And he loved to the end. And lastly, he saved the unworthy. Luke 23. All these things Jesus did in just a few hours period at the end of his life, at his weakest point. And we live in a world that's telling you to focus on yourself. And you deserve, and you feel this, and nobody understands, and you, and you, and pay attention to you, and you poor you, and you, and you, and you, and you. Your problems, your troubles, nobody else has it like you, and you have to do this, and everybody should be doing this for you, and you, and you. And it's pounded into your head day and night in our society. And here's Jesus. Are you okay? Let's take care of Mom. Yeah, I want you saved. Forgive you guys. I'm dying for all of you. I even want you Pharisees saved. He's just different than us. He's thinking of others the whole time. He saved the unworthy. Verse 43, one of the, what did he say on the cross? There's not very many things he said on the cross. One of those, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. He was saving the unworthy. Understand, Jesus was about to draw his last breath, and he won a soul to himself. He could have said, man, I just got to endure this thing and get done. Forget this guy. I am so weak. All my blood's gone. I'm just done. Yet, this man gets saved. He got saved. He's going to heaven. He's up there right now, rejoicing, remembering, thanking God, and saying, whew, that was close. Amen. That was really close. Because Jesus can save anybody. Amen. He can save a thief on the cross who was mocking him shortly before. And he loves everybody. And this man never did a good work. He never got to prove his salvation. He never got to go to church. And yet Jesus loved him and saved him without anything at the last second. And Jesus can save people on their deathbed. And my hope is that many people, as they're dying, remember to call upon Jesus. Because whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Period. Not as long as they And he called upon Jesus. And he did this. As I did this message and was my meditation this week, what did Jesus do in his last hours? Jesus isn't on earth anymore. What are we doing? It brings everything into perspective. 1 Peter 4:1 says, for as much as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. How are you doing in your suffering? He suffered all that for you and never got bitter and gave up on you. So you're going to go through some suffering for God for a while. All that live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. It is given unto you, Philippians 1:29, on the behalf of Christ, not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for his sake. When you have to suffer for the cause of Christ, will you do it? Like he did it for you. Because now in this American self-attitude, selfishness thing, when somebody goes through hard times, they just get bitter at God and give up. But Jesus suffered in his last hours for you. And he suffered. He was a man of sorrows. Didn't have to be. And you're going to quit on him because you suffered for a while? He never told you his life is going to be easy. Eternity is blessed and wonderful. Better than paradise. But this life, we don't know. You're willing to suffer for him. What if the persecution comes that might be coming? He forgave. Does his forgiveness bring in perspective the way you forgive? He did, by the way, he forgave after everything, knowing everything. And he still forgave willingly and asked God to forgive them. He didn't say, Father, forgive them. They turned it around. He said, they don't know what they're doing. He prayed. And by the way, Stephen was the same way. They're killing him. And he said, Father, forgive them. Just like Jesus. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Are you forgiving like Jesus? He did it while his body was hanging there. And the people who crucified him. Bring into perspective what the devil's magnified in your life and how unfair you've been treated. No, Jesus was treated unfair. I deserve worse than I get. It is by God's mercies I'm not consumed. There's a million things I've done wrong I never suffered for. I've been blessed and God's been merciful to me. I'm not going to get bitter at God because I go through some hard times and some tragedies happen in my life. If God can forgive me for all that I've done to him, I can forgive. He took care of his family. Are you doing that? He took care of his mom while he was carrying the sins of the whole world. While his body was in rags. Probably in shock and everything else. He finished the work of God. Will you stay faithful unto the end? Are you going to find somebody who's going to come along and take you out of the will of God? Somebody in a relationship? Are you going to go and say, you know what, I don't want to go to church, I just want to have fun, and you're going to leave the will of God? Is the world going to call you and you're going to follow the world and leave the Savior who stayed on the cross to the end? Is some hobby, some possessions, some career going to take you away from God? Are you going to be faithful and finish the work that God's given you to do? Jesus stayed until the last second. He had to be separated from God. He had to thirst in his soul and suffer that for us. And he did it to the very last second. Then he said, it is finished. Will you breathe your last breath saying, I finished my course, Lord. I kept the faith. I stayed faithful to you till I died. Or you will live with regret in eternity you didn't. Jesus loved. And he was talked about, bold, behold how he loved them in John 11. He just loved. He loved them to the end. He loved that thief on the cross. Who is mocking him? Herein shall all men know that you are my disciples. You have love one for another. How's your love? Jesus did that love. He gave that love with the person who mocked him, who was guilty, next to him. And he loved them. Are you loving people unconditionally like God loves? And then he saved the unworthy. He won a soul right before he died. He's done all this to save everybody because he can save anybody. He could have saved Hitler if Hitler wanted to be saved. He could have saved Mussolini. He could have saved Jack the Ripper. He could have saved anybody. He could have saved Charles Manson. He could have saved anybody if they'd let him. Now, not all let him, but he died for the sins of the whole world, the Bible says. Anybody you meet is a potential person that come to Christ. Are you preaching the gospel to every creature? Jesus could have said, don't talk to me. I'm almost dead. But he made the effort. Today, you'll be with me today you'll be with me in paradise. Because winning the soul was that important. People coming to Jesus is that important. That's why the martyrs are the martyrs. I'll never forget, I've told a story, but I was reading a book about a missionary going to the islands. I'm drawing a blank. Patton was his name. He went to the island of cannibals, a bunch of I think it's Vanuatu now, and some other islands down there, I believe is what they were. And they had a group of missionaries, and they were all these animals, these islands, all the people were cannibals. And they got together, and all these missionaries got together, and they said, who's going first? Because everybody's ever had land on these islands, every castaway, every Englishman, everybody has been eaten. And two of them volunteered. These two got in the boat. They went to the shore. The boat came in near shore. These two got out, walked onto shore. The boat took off. Cannibals came down, killed him, ate him. Had 45 minutes of ministry. And Patton said, all right, we got the island now. The blood of the martyrs is on there. We got the island. Who's next? And the next one was him. And won the island to Christ. Wasn't easy, but to see a soul saved, it's worth it. And you'll stop witnessing for pride. You get a little embarrassed because you're a little busy, because you're afraid somebody will laugh at you, because that stops you. Jesus is on the cross getting the gospel out. So Jesus did this just as a challenge to me. If our Savior in his last hours did all of that, and all the pain he was in, how can I do less? Because I feel great. And I've got good health, and I got technology, and I've got lots of food, and I'm not being killed. I've got all these advantages and opportunities. I can walk out and witness 100 people. I can take tracts. I can go on the internet and put the gospel on social media. I can do 1,000 things. Jesus did all that in a few hours. While he was at the worst point, no human will ever suffer like he suffered. And he did all that in those last hours of his life. This should make you, number one, just love him. We love him because, don't you love Jesus? What a Savior. How can you not serve him? How can you rebel against him when he's so good to you? But number two, it should challenge us and bring our things that stop us and our unforgiveness and our lack of love into perspective. And make us do the right thing. Let's pray. Father, the last hours of Jesus, a lot happened. And the thief on the cross was saved. That just got a hold of me this week, Lord. Thank you for that. Never did a good work, never joined a church, never got baptized. Just right there at the last seconds of his life. Thank you for being so merciful. I pray today we'd love you. And I pray today we'd bring our lives into perspective and realize what we can do if Jesus can do that on the cross. Thank you for the truth of the Bible, Lord. Help us do the right thing, and may this impact our lives and do your purpose, Lord. And most of all, if somebody's not saved today, may they come to Jesus and realize they can call upon him right now and be saved. We pray this in Jesus' name. Our heads are bowed.